Welcome back to another explainer. Man, I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're doing something a little different and honestly incredibly fun. Today, you and your team are stepping right into the shoes of actual app designers. We aren't just going to sit here and talk about tech in the abstract. We are going to roll up our sleeves, tackle some real-world problems, and engineer solutions literally from the ground up. Get ready, because by the time we wrap this up, you are going to look at every single app on your phone completely differently.
Okay, so how are we actually going to pull this off? Well, here is our roadmap. First, we'll talk about what it takes to step into that designer mindset. Then we'll figure out how to find the exact right problem to solve. After that, we dive into the secret sauce, a framework called the IOSP model. And finally, we'll wrap up by refining your idea and getting it ready for the big pitch.
So let's jump right into the first part of this journey. The challenge is officially waiting for you. As you step up to try and solve some of those everyday inconveniences, I've got to let you in on the ultimate plot twist in the tech world. You ready for this? You do not actually need to know how to code to design a truly brilliant app. Seriously, today is entirely about the logic, the workflow, and the design proposal. If you can think logically and solve a puzzle, you can absolutely design an app. But before we build anything, we have to figure out what we're actually building. That means finding the right problem and, more importantly, filtering out all the noise. See, when most people set out to make an app, they immediately start obsessing over flashy buttons and cool color schemes. We need to filter all that out. We're going to focus purely on the problem itself. Think about everyday annoyances that you, your teachers, or your community face. Stuff like students constantly forgetting their homework, people endlessly circling the block looking for available parking, struggling to track daily reading time, forgetting to drink enough water, or even just getting lost trying to find a classroom on the first day of school. The absolute best approach here is to brainstorm silently for a bit, get those ideas down, and then respectfully debate them with your partner. This brings us to what I like to call the Goldilocks rule of problem solving. Let's say your idea is to build an app to stop climate change. Look, that is an incredibly noble goal, but it is way, way too broad for one simple app to tackle. It's just too big. But what about an app that helps students track and reduce classroom electricity use? Aha, that one is just right. It's specific, it's actionable, and it's totally realistic for an elegant, simple app to actually fix. Once you have that just right idea, you've got to stress test it. You do this by asking 3 very specific questions. Who experiences this problem? What exactly is it? And how will you know when it's actually solved? So let's use a running example. Say our target audience is middle school students who constantly forget their assignments. How do we know the problem is solved? Simple. We see an increase in assignments being completed and submitted on time. It's incredibly clear, highly focused, and gives us a distinct goal to shoot for. All right, now that we know what we're solving, let's talk about how to solve it. This is where we introduce the engine of your app, the IOSP model. This model is essentially your magic weapon. It's the framework that lets you map out the absolute simplest, most useful version of your app. ISOP stands for input, output, store, and process. But here's an interesting little twist for you. Even though it's called ISOP, when we actually sit down to design the thing, we don't start with the input. We actually start by focusing on the output first. You always want to begin with the end in mind. So output? This is exactly what the user sees, hears, or receives from the app. You need to ask yourself, what useful result is this app actually providing to the person holding the phone? A fantastic exercise here is to physically sketch out a single app screen and label every single piece of information you see. Is there a pop-up message, a helpful reminder, a progress chart? Whatever visual result the user gets, that right there is your output. Once you know exactly what the app needs to spit out, you have to figure out how that information physically enters the app in the first place to make it all happen. And that, my friends, is your input. This could be anything: typed text, tapping a specific button, taking a picture, pulling in GPS location data, or even reading sensor data like temperature. Going back to our middle school homework app example, the inputs would naturally be things like the student typing in the assignment name, selecting the subject from a drop-down menu, and entering the final due date. Next step in the model is store. You can just think of this as your app's memory bank. But listen, I have to give you a massive warning right now. Be highly selective. Your app should absolutely not be a digital hoarder. You only want to save the vital information that the app will actually need again for later. So for our homework app, it definitely needs to remember the user's login info, the assignment details they just inputted, and maybe some previous completion scores. Honestly, everything else, it's just wasted space. Keep it lean. And finally, we arrive at process. This is the actual brain of the entire operation. Processing is the invisible action of taking those inputs and changing them into useful outputs by comparing, sorting, or calculating the data. So how does our little homework app process things? Well, it takes the due date that the student inputted, compares it against today's actual calendar date, calculates the difference, and then sorts the list to push a reminder for assignments that are due tomorrow. That invisible calculation happening in the background, that is the absolute magic of app design. So, your engine is built and humming along beautifully. Now it's time to bring this thing to life through refining and pitching. Before you show the world your creation, you need to test it out. A truly great pitch always starts with peer review. But here is the golden rule you have to remember. Simply saying it is good to your peers is the absolute enemy of progress. It doesn't help anyone. Groups need to pinpoint exactly where they are struggling and ask for specific, actionable feedback from each other. Point out what works, sure, but really explain what could improve. Keep in mind, the best apps in the world go through thousands of iterations based on harsh, constructive critique. After you've taken that feedback and refined your idea, you're ready to build your final presentation poster. This poster is essentially your blueprint, and it's got to have a few non-negotiable elements. We need a catchy app name, a clearly defined problem and target audience, a sketch of the screen, and this is the most crucial part, a complete visual breakdown of your inputs, outputs, stored info, and processing logic. Every single piece of the IOSP model must be clearly visible to whoever is looking at your poster. And when you finally stand up there in front of everyone to pitch your brilliant idea, please keep this one vital truth in mind. The goal here is not to create the most complicated feature-packed app. The goal is to identify a human problem and design a logical, elegant technological solution. So, whatever you do, don't just stand up there and read your poster word for word. Use it as a visual aid to support the story you're telling. You want to sell the fact that you identified a real frustration and you engineered a clean, logical path to fixing it. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. How can the IOSP model help us design an app that solves a problem that you deeply care about? Because here's the secret. When you break technology down into inputs, outputs, memory, and processing, the digital world stops feeling like this untouchable magic, and it starts becoming a powerful tool that you actually control. So, what problem are you going to solve next? Thank you so much for joining me on this design journey, and honestly, I cannot wait to see what you all build.